So yeah, hit it.
Here we go. Everybody, welcome back. It's Keepin It Rio, your favorite podcast, #1 in the world in my rankings. And today it is actually Sunday. We're looking almost 8 a.m. my time here in San Antonio. And this is another one of these episodes where I went to the Facebook and said, I need somebody cool to talk to. And my guest today was one of the first ones to reply. I'm excited for today's episode. We've just gotten to meet about 4 minutes ago, but there's some positive energy going on already, folks. So welcome to Keepin It Rio. My friend, Steve Gamlin. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I think it's going to be something special. So I always, we started off and I said, none of this is scripted and it's all just from the cuff. But I start with the most basic question of them all for every episode. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Steve, so we know what we're working with here today.
Yeah, you got it. My name is Steve Gamlin. I've enjoyed life for the past 20 years as a keynote speaker, a visualization coach, creator of the Vision Board Mastery Learning Program, and I get to help frustrated entrepreneurs who are hustling and grinding, forgetting what life is supposed to be all about for them, and I help them get back in touch with their meaning and purpose in life.
Well, we've got something to talk about there for sure, because I think I fit into that category. And definitely always like learning a little bit more about how I can manage things better or be more productive. Heaven forbid, try to have even more fun than I'm having. So yeah, that's perfect. So tell us a little bit of how you got into that and mindset work and things like that. And we'll just kind of take it from there and run with it.
Yeah, it all started when I was 11 years old. And I got a few birthday candles down here. I'll be 57 in February. But when I was 11, I wanted to be a radio DJ, a stand-up comedian, an author of my own books, and a teacher of people, but not in a classroom. And I had no idea what any of that meant, but I just started to act as if. Jack Canfield talks about that all the time, act as if. So I have my old record player, my dad's little cassette recorder, and I used to do my own little radio shows. I used to write my own little books and stories and love to make people laugh. And at age 24, I got into the radio industry because a friend saw me broken, depressed on my grandfather's couch, 2 years out of college doing nothing, and asked me why I never followed my dream. So I got on the radio, did that for 10 years, worked 15 years worth of hours, burnt myself into the ground. And in the early 2000s, in a real little window of time, I walked away from radio without a plan other than a part-time wedding DJ business, went through a divorce, was tens of thousands of dollars in debt at age 35 and had to move home and live with family. And out of the ashes of that came all of this. And as I put my life back together, I took a lot of notes. And when people saw that I had done it, they asked me how I could help them do it. And that's the big gloss over broad brush version of here we are.
Yeah. And I think the big point there is that if you set your mind to doing things and you actually take the actions necessary, anything's possible, folks. I mean, this is episode 189 of this podcast. And quite frankly, my story is almost the same as yours. I wanted to be Howard Stern when I was a boy. And this thing that we do here now, just it's amazing. It's awesome that we can be that without any real qualifications. But here we are. I have no qualifications, and I'm talking to some of the coolest people on the face of the earth, learning some great things. And it was all because one day we were just like, hey, let's do a podcast, And I think sometimes people just get overwhelmed by the fear of what could go wrong. And I think that a lot of times they just need to stop thinking that way and just say, you know what if that does work? So tell me a little bit about that early career in radio. Because like I said, that definitely is something that I'm interested in, but how do you find your way into that at, a couple years out of college, no real experience to speak of? How do you find your way into a 10-year career in the radio industry the way that you did?
Yeah, well, I had that friend. It was my friend Danny who kept bugging me. Why didn't you ever get into radio? So I called a local rock station that we grew up listening to, and there's a DJ, midday jock named Cindy. And I said, hey, Cindy, my name is Steve, and I'm interested in getting into radio. And she said, well, there's a broadcast school down near Boston called Connecticut School of Broadcasting. So I looked it up, and I borrowed $4,000 from my grandfather, whose couch I was living on, broken, depressed, right? Like, when's Pepe going to get that money back? And he gave me the money. to go to broadcast school. So the summer of 92, I did 8 weeks down in Boston, lived at my mom's apartment because she was living in Boston at the time. And about a month later, I called Cindy again. I said, Cindy, I'm done school. Now what? And she said, well, I got a cousin who works at this other rock station, WCGY. She said, maybe she needs an intern. So I called there and I went down and I interviewed and I got an internship, which, pays nothing. And I drove to my friend Danny's house because I hadn't seen him all summer. And he asked where I'd been. I said, radio school. He goes, no, did you get a job? I said, yeah. Well, an internship. And of course, I got the I told you so speech. And he was so happy and he was so proud. But here's an important lesson. He died 3 weeks later. He had had cancer twice before, and it came back real quick. And I was only one of 2 friends who were allowed to be in the room with the family when he passed away. And it took me 10 years of radio to get the lesson that when someone believes in you, when you don't, you should probably listen to them because it's your own imposter voice telling you you can't. And then I burned myself out in radio and my whole life fell apart. But I learned a lot during those 10 years. And sometimes people say, well, you have a radio voice. And, well, it's a damn shame I didn't have it when I was on the radio because I didn't use my voice until year 8 of 10. And only then because I had to, because I didn't have the guts or the perceived talent to be a DJ. And other people saying, no, you're a great producer, but I don't think your voice is good for a DJ. So I never used it until I had to, because our morning guy quit on a rock station that we took off satellite and made live, very Howard Stern-ish.
Nice. Yeah.
And we had a blast on it. We won awards with it. I won International Writing in Production Comedy Awards for bits that I wrote, but I didn't have the guts to be on a microphone until the 8th year. And I took over the morning show because our morning guy quit. Otherwise, we're going to come off satellite. And it was the worst 4 days of radio you've ever heard, because every break, I think I changed my voice to sound different. And the final day, I'm just like, hey, everybody, Steve here, New Hampshire's Classic Rock Station, Big 101.5. I may suck as a DJ, but if you tolerate me reading the weather for the next 42 seconds, I'll play you a kick-ass rock song. And I did the weather, hit the song. And I thought, well, that's it. Boss knocks on the door. He goes, bro, that was the funniest thing you said all week. Just be yourself. Bang.
I love it. And it's one of those things where we all face that. No matter how confident you are, there's always something in your life that you just think is unattainable, or no matter how hard you try, it's just, shucks, my luck isn't good enough to land that stuff. And you're spot on. It's not about luck. You create your own luck in this world. And I'm a firm believer of that. I mean, myself, just sitting here in San Antonio, it's a crazy story. We bought a roofing company that was out of business, and I had never been to San Antonio a minute in my entire life. And I moved down here. We started the roofing business back up. We built it up. And, that was literally from just, hey, do you want to go to San Antonio? There's this roofing company that's out of business. We're thinking about buying, and we think you're the guy that can do it. And that vote of confidence made me do something that, when I look back, was pretty crazy. And I've enjoyed it. It's been a rocky and up and down type roller coaster ride. But what if I just said, no, I don't want to do that, Then I'm looking 5 years in the past saying, man, what if I would have done that? I'm stuck where I'm at now. And what if I would have done something different? And to be honest with you, Steve, that has been my story for many, many years. I was a truck driver in Ohio. I worked for a roofing supply company for years as a delivery driver. And one day, the owner of the company called me into the office, and we had a great relationship. Everybody was really cool there. But when the owner says, hey, can you come in here and, shut the door? You start thinking, uh-oh, what have I done today to get myself in this predicament? Yep. But they asked me a simple question. Hey, we're going to open a branch in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we want you to go. We think you'd be perfect for it. And I'm in my mind thinking, damn, I'm a driver. Like, why do you see that I would be a good, I don't need to go down there to drive a truck. I could drive a truck here. What do you want? I ended up being the manager of the store for a few years and learning the ins and outs of that end of the thing. And that's kind of helped me along the way. But one day I decided I didn't love that. Just like you, I had no plan. I came to Texas randomly, and I've never left. That was 13 years ago. Wow. And, without the ability to say, hey, you know what? I don't see it in myself at this point, but this guy here who owns this large company that's big enough to open a roofing supply company down in Charlotte from scratch, he sees it. And I'd like to thank Jim Ash for that. He's a guy that changed my life because of those opportunities. But again, if you don't take them, you just kind of wonder. So kudos to you for saying, hey, I want to do something more. I found something that I want. But you also did mention that after the radio career, things didn't go so well. So tell me a bit about some of the turbulence that you have to face in this middle portion before you get back through to the other side of that tunnel.
Yeah, it was a completely self-created crash and burn. I call it, right down into the ashes. I just blew everything up without a major plan, other than, like I said, that little wedding DJ business that I think at the time was grossing about 11.5 a year.
Nice.
So here I am, crashed at, my dad and stepmom's house. I had just built a very nice recording studio in my dad's basement in a little office. So he said, hey, bud, you're here working 6-7 days a week anyway. Why don't you just grab the bedroom down the hall and stay as long as you need to? And that was the first safe thing that it was the first like cocoon, a place where I could just sit there and work on myself. I did a lot of reading, didn't go on a single date for more than a year because I said, look, I only want to fall in love one more time in this lifetime. That's it. I'm a hopeless romantic and I'm not a player, never have been, never want to be. And I said, look, I want to fall in love one more time. So I got to work on becoming the best version of me. And the best version of me is not a person who, like I used to do, if there's conflict, I just walk the other direction and let it festers and blows, and eventually it destroyed my marriage. So I did a lot of reading and did a lot of writing. I just started working with a life coach at that time. And I was his first client. He had just gotten his certificate. So I'm his guinea pig for everything. And he asked me if I ever heard of the DVD that had just come out called The Secret, all about law of attraction and all that stuff. I said, no, but I'll check it out. I watched it 9 Sunday nights in a row and just kept taking notes and thinking how I could apply it in my life. And in it, there was this one little 90-second segment from some guy named John Assaraf talking about vision boards. And I thought it was kind of cool. And in August of 2003, on a very hot and humid Friday afternoon, I had $3 left in my pocket. And I figured I would take out my frustrations on a bucket of golf balls at a local driving range because I suck as a golfer. So I went to the farthest tee box so it wouldn't damage any cars in the parking lot. And I was underneath this big, long train of power lines and big steel poles. And a thunderstorm came ripping through. And everybody but me ran from the storm. And I sat there for an hour, barefoot in the wet grass, under the power lines, swinging away, hitting my bucket and the buckets of 2 guys who ran from the storm and never came back. And at one point, I even held up the club and just looked up and said, I dare you. Go ahead. Take your best shot. Not mad at God, but it was kind of like my Lieutenant Dan in the crow's nest of the shrimp boat in Forrest Gump yelling at the storm. I'm mad at myself. I wasn't mad at God or anything else. And at the end of the hour, I could even barely lift my arms. I got to my car and I opened the door and the rain stopped and the sun came out. And I just started laughing. I just thought it was hysterically funny that my life sucks. And here I am complaining and then the sun comes out. Well, the next day I was on the phone with Coach Dan. And he says, how was your week? And I told him the story of that hour, as funny and brutally self-deprecating as I could make it. And when he stopped laughing, he asked me, have you ever thought of being a motivational speaker or a stand-up comedian? I think you'd be really good at both. He didn't know about my 4 goals when I was 11 years old. DJ, stand-up comic, teacher of people, and an author. And at the time, my first book was being written. So at age probably 36 at that point, here it is, all falling into place. And again, had no idea how to pursue it. In the junk mail pile on his desk was a brochure from a local community college that had an intro to stand-up comedy class that started 2 weeks later. And a week after that, I went to my first Toastmasters meeting. And here we are. Again, another friend named Dan. And I shared this recently on a podcast. And the host goes, so it's like a guardian angel named Dan. I said, yeah. He goes, there's a guardian angel, Daniel. Do you know what he stands for? I said, no, I looked it up. He is the patron saint of speakers, poets, musicians, people of influence, teachers, people who share a message. So I had 2 guardian angels named Daniel who both breathe life into me and got my butt out of the ashes twice.
I love it, man. I'll tell you what, that's some inspirational stuff right there as well. And you think the way that messages can be received in life, sometimes you see things and you realize, oh man, like that was something I probably should have looked into at the time, and who knows what could have happened. But when you see a sign like that and it's like, man, that's speaking to you directly, and it's telling you this is what I've got to do, because that's what's taking me and pulling me towards it, because you were aware of it, you recognized it. And I think a lot of people miss these opportunities on a daily basis because they're just not paying attention, and they're not looking around, and they're focused on something else. Like you said, they're sitting underneath a power line with golf clubs because, woe is me type stuff, when just around the corner, the sun's shining and everything's nice and bright and happy. And when you realize that, and you end up saying, okay, maybe it's not all that bad after all. I'm starting over. I'm 35, and life isn't exactly what I'd envisioned, but now we have a chance to kind of wipe the slate clean and start over. And I think that's the perfect analogy for the vision board concept, because that's kind of what it is. You can change what you want and what your goals are any given time, and from realizing then this is what you're drawn to do, how do you put this into action, and how do you make it start to happen for you?
Well, I took the intro to stand-up comedy class, and that taught me a ton about using my face, my voice, my body, and everything as a presenter. It didn't matter if it was comedy routine or speaking or whatever. So for those two things to happen at exactly the same time, I realized how much power I could have, and how much not power over people, but power to connect with people as a speaker, as a comedian, as a writer. And just started to do speaking competitions inside of Toastmasters, and I got a pretty good reputation up here in the Northeast during those years. Once drove 7.5 hours up into Canada to speak for 6.5 minutes, and won the Humorously Speaking competition for 3 states and 3 Canadian provinces. It's also the same trip I learned do not joke with the guards at the border, because they don't think you're funny. I got my car searched
I've been there. That's
because I made a joke.
ironic.
So
was your joke about having someone small in the trunk?
No, they said, do you plan on bringing anything back into the country tomorrow? I said, yeah, a trophy. Guy goes, sir, see that parking spot over there? Why don't you put your car in there and go inside the building?
Yeah.
So they searched my car. And turns out, if you're a single male with no luggage, because I was driving up, competing, and driving back the next day.
Back, yeah.
I set off every red flag there was that I was, like drug trafficker or something. So I get it now, but at the time I just thought I was being funny. And so, yeah, I got my car searched and went up, competed, won, was very, very blessed to win, and drove back home the next day with the trophy in the passenger seat with the seatbelt around it. My hands at 10 and 2, looking straight ahead. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. Have a good day, sir. Goodbye. Thank you. Back home.
But you got your trophy, and that's all that really mattered about the entire experience. And to me, that's pretty funny. I did have the same thing happen to me one time on a trip to Mexico. So I understand jokes are not always appropriate, and sometimes they can get you into a bind, but we continue to do them because 99% of the time people appreciate it, right?
Yeah. Well, we also get good stories to share out of it. That's one of the stories now that I get to share on stage, and people always say, well, I'm afraid to fail. I'm afraid to fail. I'm afraid to try. I'm afraid to do this. I go, you know what? That which doesn't kill me gives me a great story to share on stage. And that's why I laugh when people go, hey, Steve, how do you make up the stories you share on stage? And I tilt my head like a puppy and I go, really? Like, have you not been paying attention? I'm a pretty open dude. Everything that's happened in my life over the past, well, almost 57 years, but especially the past 22 years, man, if it can help somebody else, I'm going to tell it. And I don't care if I'm the fool in the story, because I learned something from it. And that's why when people look at guys like you and me, they'll see all the things that you've accomplished. They go, oh man, you're lucky. And we know it's not luck. We know it just took that little bit of guts to take that one step, get our foot in the door, and not get thrown back out the door. That's what my dad used to tell me. Hey, bud, you got your foot in the door. He goes, now work your ass off so you don't get thrown back out the door. He goes, and don't follow what anybody else says. Do what you know is right. Stick to your core values.
That right there is a life lesson for everyone. And boy, I'll tell you, you hit the nail on the head. Luck is it is what it is. It's whatever you make of it. And if I had luck to go along with all this courage and stuff, I'd probably be, taking over the world already. But again, there's a story to be told, and the journey is the most fun part of the entire thing, I've come to find out. Yeah. And like you, I have many stories that I can share, and I think it's great because I do public speaking as well. I've been on stage several different times. The podcast, I get to talk to folks that I just meet, and you have to have a little bit of insanity about yourself to just jump on and say, hey, I hope this works out. I hope it's going to be great. And if you believe that it's going to be great, it's usually pretty damn great. So I love it. Let's continue moving forward now as you found your calling. You're doing comedian stuff. You're out there on stages. You're getting more comfortable, more confident in yourself. You're starting to realize, hey, I've got what it takes and I'm going to be successful at this. Tell me a little bit about how that continues after you get your confidence. You start getting into bigger situations. You start meeting more people. Tell me about some opportunities that have presented themselves because of that, and the people that you've already reached and the people that you're continuing to look to reach.
Yeah, well, it's and to be 100% transparent, it started off as a shred of confidence. Like, imagine your toes clinging to the edge of a ledge. That's about where the confidence was.
Yep.
And somebody recently blew me off for a Zoom call, and the next day I caught up with her on social media, and I just said, I hope everything's okay, And she goes, I'm really embarrassed, but the reason I bailed on the call is because I'm intimidated by you. And I just started laughing. I answered back. I go, I'm like as threatening as a salad. What part of me is intimidating? She goes, your confidence. And then I said, let's get on a call now. I said, look, my confidence can barely drive a car, and it sure as hell can't buy a beer yet. It's not that old. So let's work on your stuff. So I had a little bit at first, but every year it got a little more. And as I started to build the vision boards, I started to see what I really wanted in life. Like, when it's stuck in our head, it's small. One of my biggest ones was to meet Jack Canfield, who's the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And he wrote The Success Principles, which I think is one of the greatest books in personal development. And he was in The Secret. And I put him on my vision board every year. And right around 2013 or 14, when my vision board mastery program was brand new, actually the day it was a physical product available for sale, I got a vendor table at a women's conference here in New Hampshire. Jack Canfield was the keynote speaker that day. And here's something I never would have done as the old version of me. 600 people in the conference room. 5 of us are guys because it's a women's conference. And the woman in charge gets up and says, okay, before we start today, I want you to stand up and go introduce yourself to somebody you've never met. And I'm way in the back, and somebody taps me on the shoulder and goes, hey, look, there's Jack Canfield. And the little voice in my head, instead of being scared, said, you know what? We never met Jack Canfield. That's the assignment, right? Got up. I was the only person that even walked directly to him, held my hand out, said, Mr. Canfield, my name is Steve Gamlin. I just want to say thank you for inspiring me to be the type of speaker I am. And I know you're in The Secret. I'm big on vision boards. I've created what I feel is the most in-depth program that I've ever seen on helping people to create vision boards. And he could not have been more gracious. He shook my hand. He said, you're so welcome, and I appreciate you coming over. By the way, would you send me a copy of your program? He handed me a business card with his address on it. I said, yes, sir. I'll send you a copy. And I did a video later that day after he went on stage for his second part of the keynote after lunch, and he got to visualization. He goes, oh, by the way, there's a young man here who says he created the best program in the world to teach you how to do this. You should go talk to him. Jaw on the floor. People are all turning around because I knew a few hundred of the people in there just from networking. And they're looking at me going, did Jack Canfield just say your name? Yeah. And that to me was the greatest testimony to here's where you were when you wouldn't say boo to anybody. And you just talked to your favorite speaker and personal development guy on the planet because somebody said, go introduce yourself to somebody you've never met. And there's been a bunch of people, but that for me was and still remains the mountaintop right there.
Absolutely. And I love everything that you just said there because I've got the same experiences. I mean, with this podcast, I was looking at my Facebook memories from 5 years ago, and we just kind of touched on this before we started recording, but it was National Podcast Day. And my post was, my favorite podcast is Hardcore Closer with Ryan Stewman. One day I'm going to have a podcast. Well, we fast forward until about maybe a month or so ago, and Ryan Stewman was on my podcast. And it was another one of those stories like what you just had. I was looking at social media. Ryan Stewman posts something about, you just got to take action, go out there and be the best at whatever it is you got to do. But you have to take the first step and, tell me something about the future. And my thing was, Ryan Stewman is going to be on my podcast. Well, the dude responds to me and schedules a time to be on there. And up until the minute that he showed up, I was like, whatever. That's probably a bot. That's probably not going to be a real thing. I'm setting myself up for disappointment, honestly. And then boom, the screen shows up. It's Ryan Stewman. We talked for over an hour. It was pretty badass. I'm not going to lie. Last week, I just had my favorite NASCAR driver, Jeremy Mayfield, who I've been a fan of for 25 plus years. And when I started the podcast, I have a vision board, and that was the number one on I had Mount Rushmore, and that face was number one on Mount Rushmore. It's taken me 187 episodes to get there, but we had the interview this past week. And again, that wouldn't have happened had I just sat here and wished and hoped and, bailed on my Zoom calls. So there's a lot to be said for that, but I really love the concept of the vision board. And I want to talk to you about that really, because it's been something that's been instrumental in my life for several years now, and kind of want to get some input from the guy with the greatest program who's, really specializes in that. Tell me a little bit about some of your things that you teach people, how to set these goals, how to put these boards together, and how to keep them relevant throughout the course of the year.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I see, and I still hear it all the time, and I'm so thankful for one of my mentors and coaches. Her name is Terry Levine. She sent me a beautiful message the other day. She goes, I don't know if you realize it, but you have flipped the script on what vision boards really are. She goes, you're going out there against what everybody else says, because to most people, vision boards, it's an arts and crafts project.
Right.
It's something they slap together in the waning moments of one year, or when they wake up from the hangover of New Year's in the new year. But here's the thing I tell people to be careful of. Do not do a vision board starter kit. Don't slap a picture of a Lamborghini, a yacht, a private mansion, a jet, a helicopter, a honking gold watch, and a bank vault full of gold bars and cash. Nothing wrong with material stuff. But to me, and here's the biggest thing I say right up front, a vision board, I believe, is more about who you become than what you get. That's what not a lot of people get. And of course, most people do the letter to Santa Claus, which is all the material things. What most people also don't do is take stock of exactly where their life is right now. That's the point A, like if you think of GPS. They just say, well, I want something else. I want more. I want better. But then they just do the material stuff. So the way I teach it, as I use a tool that's pretty common in the world of personal development. It's called a life wheel. And the one that I use, I've tweaked it to my approach and my teachings. It includes your physical health, your emotional well-being. Imagine that, setting goals for the emotions you want to feel on a regular basis. Your closest relationships, your core values that guide everything, your faith, if that's an important part of your life, which kind of does the same, but the authority comes from a different direction. Your connection to the world in real ways, and that took a beating during the pandemic for a lot of people, depression, anxiety, addiction. And then your job and your money. And that's when a lot of people go, Steve, that's a lot. Should I just make a separate vision board for each? In my opinion, no. And here's why. All 8 of those areas are working together 24/7 in your life, whether you're paying attention or not. So wouldn't it be a good idea to set at least one goal for each category and set them in a 1-year increment? I know some people have longer term goals. That's fine. What's 1 year's worth of progress toward that goal? Because if you start setting a bunch of 20-year goals, you're going to bail out in about a week.
Yep.
Because you're not going to feel any progress. So that's where I start with people. Know where you are now, know where you want to be a year from now in each of these categories, and show me one goal for each. Don't go getting pictures yet. Just start to assess where you are. And then a big thing that most people don't even think of, why do you want that? And I'm talking an emotionally connected gut level. Why? Because the why is going to be the spark in your heart and the gas in your tank that's going to keep a pebble from becoming a Jersey barrier. If you get a strong enough why connection to something, you're going to go full on Kool-Aid man through a brick wall. Oh, yeah. And you're going to keep going for it. Not like an old, remember the first generation of the Roomba vacuum? They weren't real smart yet. They just knew that if they tapped something, they would just back up and go somewhere else. That's what a lot of people do with their goals. So my mission is to help people just dial in on where they are right now, warts and all, where they want to be a year from now, and then build a plan to do that. The program I created, it's 10 audio modules. You don't gather pictures to module 7. Most people start there. They go to vision board parties, wine, cheese, cracker, scissors, glitter, glue sticks, poster boards, and magazines. They get loaded and they slap a bunch of things and they giggle and they think they're manifesting. And it's something. It's like resolutions, goals. Vision board party, my program.
You're spot on too. And I love that concept because I do believe your goals have to be realistic. You get defeated if, like you say, I didn't put a Ferrari on my vision board. We did this exercise for years with my roofing company. And then I went to another training organization last year, and that was the thing that they kept focusing on your vision board. You want to have, what kind of car do you want? And I'm like, I don't care about what kind of car I have. Like, I want to do 150 episodes of my podcast. I want to, go out and create an opportunity for myself to provide a living for other people. I want to lose weight. And the reality is, if you look at this over the course of the last 4 years, I was 100 pounds heavier 4 years ago, and I was not happy because I just didn't feel good. And I was just, ugh. So you start the goal in my vision board that I did 4 years ago. It's crazy because when you mention this, I start really thinking about it. Almost everything on that vision board came to reality. It was to run a 10K that year. I ended up doing a half marathon last year or 2 years ago. So I exceeded that, but I did the 10K. It was to one day purchase the company from my business partners, which I have done. And it was to, get myself in better physical condition. And I started doing it, and you start, taking the picture. Every 2 weeks, I would take a picture. And then you start looking at them and you say, okay, look, when you're depressed and you don't feel like going out and going for a walk at the end of the day, or you've just had a bummer day, you flip onto the thing and you see that and you say, okay, good, we keep going. I would have quit if I was working towards a Ferrari because it's like, that's never going to happen at this rate. But when you break it into small wins and you break it into, like you say, your realistic modern surroundings and what your life is currently like, and you're truthful with yourself. That's the key, I think. A lot of people, they're not truthful. You don't want to admit fault. You don't want to admit that you're not perfect. And I think the sooner that you're able to do that and be realistic with your goals, the better off you're going to be. And then it's just continuing to put in the work, right?
Yeah. Staying consistent. And like you did, taking a picture every 2 weeks. And that's a big part of what I talk about is track your progress on this stuff. I mean, how do most people set goals? They do resolution. I want to be happier. I want to be healthier. I want more money.
Great.
Did they track it? No, because you see them again a year later between Christmas and New Year's and go, well, are you happier, healthier, and have more money? I don't know. So what do? They just change the date at the top. They're going to cross out 2024 and put 2025 and do it again and think they're setting their goals, where a big part of it for me, actually on my vision board, I've got tracking pictures. Like, if you see somebody doing a fundraiser and you see this big building downtown and there's a giant thermometer on their lawn, and every once in a while when they raise another $1,000, they color in that line and it goes up and up and up and up and up. I've got one of those as part of my health goals. 3.5 years ago, the day I joined Apex, which is founded by Ryan Stewman, May 4th, 2021, I weighed 247 soggy, bloated pounds at 6'2". I could hide it, but I looked and felt horrible. I was draining a bottle of 94 proof rum a week with a very tall rum and Coke every night to relax, which did not help me sleep well. And I hadn't seen the inside of a gym in 3.5 years at that point. And that day I said, not only am I going to feel better, I set originally a target goal of 210 pounds, and now the goal is 198. So I get up 5 days a week. I work out for 90 minutes to 2 hours, including riding our Peloton cycle. So this year's goal is to pedal 3,000 miles on the Peloton cycle. So I've got a tall thermometer looking thing on my vision board. Every time I knock off another 100, I set up my camera, I video myself coloring in that line. And you can actually hear, and I've got a couple of clients who say they love this. You can hear the squeak of the highlighter on the paper. And they said, oh, when I hear that, they said, that makes me smile. So I track my progress the whole way, like you did, taking pictures every 2 weeks. And if you took it like a flip book at the end of the year, if you took all those things together, you're watching yourself get thinner. And every time I tell that story, it reminds me of an episode of King of Queens. I don't know if you ever were into that show in the early 2000s.
Oh, absolutely.
There was an episode where the main character, Doug, has a deck of cards that he had printed with himself on the back, and he flips them and he goes, look what happens when I flip through them all. I'm perfectly still, just like in real life. I don't move. And I'm like, we're doing the opposite. We're showing over the course of that year the progress. I mean, I every time I share a little video of me with that little highlighter squeaking on the paper, somebody shoots me a DM and says, I thought of you this morning. I didn't want to work out, but I went to the gym because I knew you were going to work out today. And then I saw this. So thanks for keeping me going. And as a coach, man, there's no higher praise in the world than for somebody to say, because I saw you do it, I did it.
You know, and you're spot on. I absolutely love getting feedback from people, and it's very similar to that. And a funny story I have, and we're talking about, you know, being able to share stories, is about, I guess it was 3 years ago. I was just kind of getting into it. And one of the people that I always looked up to was Jocko Willink. Yeah. And he's pretty awesome. You know, like, you really have to be truthful with yourself. If you read his books and you follow him, it's like, this dude will, you know, he'll smack you in the face and tell you you're lying to yourself. Well, I have a friend, and these two things go together. He does a personal development conference every year, and Jocko was one of the guests. He was going to be one of the keynote speakers. So I flew to Florida, and a couple of my friends went with me, and they met Ed Milet the same day. But I'm sitting at a bar, and Ed Milet's just right there beside me, and we just kind of start talking. But I recognized about Jocko, every single day he would post on the social media. It was like 3:30 in the morning, and it would be like, I'm at the gym. It would be a mat with some sweat on it or some weights or whatever. So I'm like, this dude goes to the gym at that time every day. I'm in the same hotel. So I'm going to go to the gym at that time and see if this dude's there. So I show up, and sure enough, I'm the only person in this gym with this guy. And I walked up to him, and it was fairly intimidating. I'm not going to lie. He's a pretty serious guy. But I told him that. I said, look, the reason why I came down here was because I've started this journey to try to lose weight. I knew that you would be here because every single morning I see that, and that's what gets me up and gets me going. And I got pictures with Jocko, and he's like, dude, that's awesome. You know, he was the nicest guy. And I just thought to myself, you know, if I would have just been intimidated, or I would have said, man, you know, I'm fat, this dude's going to look at me like I'm a chubby little idiot. But it was quite the opposite. He's like, you know, much respect to you for being here at this time. I come here because this is when the winners are here. And this is when the dedicated, disciplined people show up. And to this day, I go to the gym at 5 a.m. I go 6 days a week myself. And I tried the other day to go in the evening. I couldn't do it, because you can tell the difference. It's the people that go at 5 a.m. They're there to do the work. They're there to get better and improve and continue to move forward. And some of the other people are just there for show or to hang out and text their buddies and do videos. But that was really cool. And from that moment, I talked to my friends who are with me, and I said, you know what? My buddy is the one putting on this conference. I said, I'm going to speak on stage at this event next year. Well, Steve, let me tell you a story. Mm-hmm. This happened to me last year. I became the co-MC of this very event. And I got to go up on stage. I got to introduce Forrest Griffin, the UFC fighter, onto the stage, several high-level entrepreneurs in my industry. And it was one of those things where I proclaimed it that day, and literally the very next year it happened. And that was one of those, okay, whatever type things. But here we go, right? Like you say, if you can envision it and you can put in the work, anything's possible.
Yeah. And you just triggered one in me, and everything you said and all the people you're talking about, man, they're my Mount Rushmore. I've on my vision board, I've got, Ed Milet does 2 podcasts a week and then a compilation on Saturdays. Well, on Tuesdays, he releases one where he's got a guest. On Thursdays, he does the solos, and like Saturdays, the compilation from past stuff. So there would always be the avatar, the mock-up to promote the podcast. Well, I took one and I took it all apart and I put it back together with my headshot in there with Ed, with my name up top and with the topic, as though I am Ed's guest on his podcast, and it's on my vision board to happen. And related to this, it hasn't happened yet, but it will. And in relation to that, at an Apex $1 Million Mastermind event a few years ago now, at the very end, these confetti cannons went off. And I grabbed 3 pieces of confetti and I went over to the side and I just busted out my pen. And on the pieces of confetti, I wrote, "I will speak on an Apex related stage within 1 year." And I posted them in my office and I put them on my vision board. And with about 2 months to spare, a good buddy of mine named Doc John Mossy sent me a message, goes, "Hey, I'm putting together a conference this fall and you're the first person I'm asking. You want to be one of my speakers?" And I looked at my vision board at the confetti and I went, hell yeah. It's like the seed was planted. And I sent him a picture of that and he goes, "Bro, I never knew that." He goes, "But I see the stuff you put out there, the energy and how genuine you are with this and how much you care and how full of crap you are not." He goes, "You were the first person I thought of." And so it had just been waiting for that right moment to happen. And we had a kick-ass event. It was really good.
Right. And again, it's just the stars line up because you're paying attention and people are seeing that you're willing to do the work and that you're not going to be one of the people that just sits by and watches. And you attract the positivity into your life and into your world. And it's funny because I have Ed Milet on my Mount Rushmore of people for the podcast as well. We'll see, but I did sit down and I had a conversation with him and I talked to him and I didn't ask him to be a guest on my podcast. And I do regret that mightily because 2 years ago I could have done it, but there's always tomorrow. And I'm gonna also have Ed Milet on Keepin It Rio someday. You're gonna be on his podcast. It's gonna be amazing. And I did get a chance to go back and do something that I really enjoyed. And this is turning into Chuck and Steve's story hour here, which is cool because that's what the podcast is supposed to be, I think.
Yeah.
But at that same event where I met Jocko, the year before I went to it, and that was when we had COVID, and Ed Milet was the keynote speaker there. And I didn't get to meet him that day, but I actually ran right into him as he was leaving the building. We literally physically bumped into each other. He was in a rush to go because his daughter had been in an accident of some sort. But I was at that event, and on day 2, Brad Lee was going to be the keynote speaker. I don't know if you're familiar with Brad Lee.
Yeah.
He's going to be the keynote speaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was during this lunch break. I just kind of wander around and I'm looking at things because I'm impressed with these conferences and I like to see how they do them. And the guy that's putting it on is a friend of mine. So I want to kind of, check it out. And I see Brad Lee going up on stage and there's nobody there. It's just straight up Brad Lee. Yeah. And I see him and I just randomly was like, "Hey, you know what, man? My company uses Lightspeed VT. I appreciate what you've done to make this better." And we had a very brief conversation where Bradley asked me about my podcast or if I had done one or how are people going to get to know who I am. And I told him, no, I don't have one yet, but I'm going to do one. And I said, I'm going to come back to you one day and I'm going to tell you about it. Well, here we go, Steve. Brad Lee was one of the speakers at the event that I was the co-MC of last year. So I meet Brad Lee. And there was a bunch of my roofing friends around, and I went right up to him and I said, look, I don't think you'll remember me at all, but this was a very critical moment for me because it kind of pushed me into doing it. And I said, I've done now 130 episodes or whatever it was. And I've got that picture with Brad Lee where I got to go tell him, you told me that I needed to do this. And that really was one of my motivational things. It wasn't the only, but it made for a damn good story in the moment too. And, I had never in my life thought that would have really happened when I said it, but you got to say it. And if you proclaim it out there publicly, you have to do it, or else everybody's going to call you out for being, full of crap. So pretty amazing stories and pretty amazing parallels that you and I have as far as that goes. Yeah. And I really appreciate this conversation. I'll be honest. I'm glad that I got up early on Sunday to have a chat with a stranger, but we're definitely not done.
No, this is just the first ripple in the pond. And the beautiful part about that is you never know where the ripples go. And that applies to kindness, to setting your goals, to how you treat people every day, to your thoughts, your words, your actions, everything. And we're supposed to be having this conversation right now, and we don't even know why yet. And that's okay.
Yeah, it's going to reveal itself somewhere down the road. And I have a feeling it's going to be in the not too distant future. So that's pretty amazing. We just barely started to scratch the surface when I broke in with my story time hour, but you start going out, you start doing speaking, you're getting on stages now, you're talking to people. You've already mentioned that several people have been talking to you saying, Steve, you're the first guy I thought of. You came to mind when this came up. This is an opportunity I think would be great for you. Now you get to be the guy who's giving out the motivation that's helping people that maybe are in a low point in their life. They find you and they're like, man, this guy's got good. Tell me a little bit about some of the people that you've got to meet since you've started doing more of the motivational stuff that come up to you and say, hey, I was intimidated by you, Steve. You're a scary guy, salad with Italian dressing, man. But because of you, I was able to overcome something. And now I'm standing here talking to you. Do you have any examples of people that do that to you? And tell me a little bit about how that feels.
Yeah, first off, I'm honored every single time somebody reaches out and trusts me enough, and they're vulnerable enough, and they're authentic enough, because a lot of these people have never met me, but they'll say, I just feel that I can share this with you. And there's this one woman, her first name is Denise, and she works for one of my longest term vision board clients. It's a company in Rhode Island. And I just got the contract to do my 17th year in a row, teaching their entire team how to build vision boards and plan for the next year. And she's part of that company. And she sent me a picture and said, I weighed around 400 pounds. And she went and she got the gastric surgery, which so many people think is like the quick fix to all of this. The surgery is nothing compared to what you need to do afterwards and how disciplined you got to be. She has lost more than half of her body weight. I think she's actually down around 180, something like that. She's in the gym 5 or 6 days a week. She sends me selfies from the gym. She sends me the before and after. And you know what you don't see in the original that you see now? A smile.
A smile. Yeah.
And she sends me that, and I cheer her on as loudly as I can. I don't think she and I have ever actually met in person because I've been doing it virtually for the last handful of years. But I hear from her on a regular basis. A buddy of mine called me up last week, and he said, "Hey, man, I'm trying to put my vision together for 2025. Can we just hop on the call?" And so we had an hour-long coaching call the other day, and he's got all these ideas now where some of them might have been a little broad brush, but now he's so dialed in. So, my relationship, because I want to have more closer relationship with my wife. So we talked about 2 dates a month. What restaurant are you going to go to? What are you going to wear? What are you going to order? What dessert are you going to split? And getting into all the senses and all this stuff. So I get these messages all the time of people with their little breakthroughs. And we've got this hashtag. It's called Click Baby Click. And it goes back to the way I talk about pursuing your goals like an old wooden roller coaster. Any one of your goals is the top of that first hill, and you start at parking lot level every time. And every day you got to do something. You got to click, click, click. Can't skip any, can't start halfway up. You got to do them all to be able to get over the top. So people like her, people like him, I get hashtag click baby click in my DMs a lot. And I'll send a message back, lay it on me, tell me what you did. And I get to hear. So, I mean, I've been in this studio on Zoom calls with people, jumping up and down, laughing with them, crying with them, cheering them on, dancing. When people celebrate those little things, I've got one client who's going on a safari in Africa because that's been her dream of a lifetime. She wants to witness being with a giraffe on the Serengeti in Africa as part of a safari. That took us 2 years for her to save the money and pay all of her other bills and take care of all the other parts of her life. We tracked it for 2 years. We talk about the thermometer tracking. Here's how simple it can be. I found a kid's coloring book with a picture of a giraffe. She had to save $10,000, so I made two, one for each year. And I wrote 500, 500, 500, 500, 500. Every time she banked $500 for that trip, she did a Facebook Live in her community with her team members and all of her clients, coloring in a $500 circle as everybody cheered her on. And every time she did it, I got tagged. Those are the moments that I love the most. It's achieving them is great. It's watching who they become along the way. That gets me emotional. Like I've been here in the studio with both arms loaded with goosebump moments before with these people. And even if we never met, if it's somebody just follows me on Facebook and says, "Hey, Steve, I saw you worked out today, so I did. Here's my picture." And they're like, in a selfie. And I'm like, damn it, that's awesome. I just love this.
It really, that is awesome. And I'll tell you that you get to hear so many stories if you just, reach out to people and let them know this means a lot to me. Thank you for telling me. I had a guy on my show a couple months ago that lost 700 pounds. And he starts talking about it because to me, I mean, 700 pounds, like how the hell did you get to be 700 pounds to begin with? But then to lose it, he weighed 900. And it's like, he said, I just one day decided I was going to go for a walk. And he said, the first mile that I walked took 31 days. And he said, the next mile took, 29 days or whatever. And he said before long, he was doing a mile in 15 days. And you take it for granted. I get up every morning and I do 4 to 6 miles every morning. But you stop and think, wow, for someone to have started at that point to where 30 days to do 1 mile was a major, major accomplishment to now weighing 200 pounds and being able to go out and do this on a regular basis. It's incredible. And he said the same thing. It was just, you started to see it. And he said, look at my picture in the fat picture and then look at me now. And the one thing that was there was, the smile, the confidence, the ability to overcome. And I think that's the greatest. I love when people reach out to me and tell me stories like that as well. And that's why we do this, right? I mean, that's exactly why we do it. And I really, really appreciate that. And I appreciate your perspective. I do want to talk a little bit about your business, and I want to talk about how we can maybe help generate some revenue for you through the podcast. I've got a very diverse group. Like I said, I have no demographic. It's anybody that I can talk to that's got a cool story or has overcome something or, is in the middle of it. And that reaches a lot of different people. So the vision board concept to me is huge. It's changed my entire life since I started doing them every year. And I've crossed off almost everything on my board each of the last 4 years. It's amazing how you can do that if you track your progress, like you say, and you set realistic goals. So someone's watching this episode, they've made it this far, they're having a great time with us, and they say, I want to do something, and it's something that I just don't think I'm capable of. But maybe if this guy gives me a little bit of guidance and maybe shows me how I can put this into effect, what would be the best way for someone to find you, to be able to learn from you, follow you, text you the wins that they get along the way? What are some of the best ways for that to happen?
The first way is to learn a bit more about me and my style and my programs and just the things that I've created. And that's at visionboardexpert.com. You can go there for that site. Very recently, somebody said, well, Steve, what are the biggest mistakes people make? And I went, oh God, here's 5 of them. So we actually created a 5-day email. It's absolutely free. And it's called The 5 Biggest Ways People Screw Up Their Vision Boards and How You Can Avoid Them. And that is at 5dayvision.com. It's the number 5, 5dayvision.com. And it's 100% free. And I get the funniest laugh emojis by the first or second day every time when people are like, oh yeah, I've done this, or I know this person, or, the people who do that right out of the gate, it helps people to dial in what visualization and vision boards are really all about. So that's my approach, man. I just want to provide value. And people ask, is your program better than anybody else's? I don't know. It worked for me, and I took a heck of a lot of notes. Thank God.
Right.
Everything I
And
teach, I lived and survived and learned from. And, they look at us and say, you're lucky. And I used to get, the phoenix rising from the ashes. I go, dude, my phoenix rides a pogo stick. I have scorched my tail feathers more times, but I've learned every time. When you pop out of that fire, you just go higher every time. Tail feathers grow back and your colors get brighter and they get stronger, and you can fly higher if you keep trying.
that's it. You just got to stop giving up and stop saying it's just not me and I'm not lucky, and things will change for you. It's crazy. And I was thinking about my vision board and was like, wow, there's more things that I got off of that board than I even really put into reality. 1 year ago yesterday was when we bought the roofing company from my former partners, and I put that on the board 4 years ago. It was a picture of them with suitcases full of money, and they were walking away. And
Wow.
that just hit me in this conversation. That hit me. I was like, wow, that was a big one that you didn't even really, it didn't even register because you just assumed it was going to happen. And
Yeah.
I forgot it was even on the board. But wow. Let's talk a bit about your motivational speaking gigs as well. Do you do travel? How does the motivational speaking work? Are you willing to, go hit these big Ed Milet conferences and be a keynote speaker if they call you? Or do you prefer to kind of keep it local?
Well, it's been local. And of course, with the pandemic a couple of years ago, it became virtual for a lot of things. And I've spoken for, groups and associations and companies here, there, and everywhere. I would love to get back out on the road and get back out on some bigger stages. But, the funny part is, despite how much fun those big events can be, I love these intimate small rooms where you can actually look people in the eye and connect with them on a regular thing. I mean, some of these bigger events, you can't even actually see the audience because and they told me this early on, if the lights are right in your eyes and you can't see a thing, you're in the perfect spot. Like, dude, I'm a connector and a storyteller. I love to connect. So do I like those big events? Of course I do. But I really love the intimate, groups, whether it's an association event or a particular company or a team within a company. I really love those because I can create a lot more impact in what I call reaching the shadows. You know, Confident people will sit up front and they're yours pretty much no matter what. It's the people sitting in the shadows of the people who are sitting in the back that I love to connect with, because that's where I used to sit when I did not have the confidence to even believe I belonged in the room. Those are the people I work the hardest for. So, 100, 200, 300, 400 people events, those are my sweet spot. I really love those.
Yeah, those are a lot of fun. And I really enjoy going and seeing the evolution of people, like you said, from the shadows. And then the next year you see them a little bit closer to the middle, then a little bit closer to the front. And then they're the ones that are sitting up front. And I was that person 5 years ago. And now it's like, wow, what an evolution. I really love the way that you explain that, because that's basically telling my life story. So I told you we were going to try to do about an hour, and we're just about up on the hour. I'm not a professional radio guy, so I have another question that I'd like to ask, and it might just bleed over a little bit, but tell me, we talked about, the Ed Milet thing, and you're going to be a guest on Ed Milet's podcast, which that will happen, I guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other goals that a professional vision board guy puts on his vision board? What's your vision board look like?
Oh, I've got all 8 areas of my life are represented. Now, here's the thing I recommend to everybody. Whatever is most important in your life doesn't have to be your number one goal, but what is most important in your life, my opinion, goes right in the center. And for me, that's me and my wife, Tina. And before we connected and fell in love, it was pictures of couples enjoying the type of relationship I wanted to have. So that's always been in the center. What I've got going out from there is my business, my health goals, my money goals, my emotion goals. I've got pictures on my vision board of me flipping off a candy bar, which makes me laugh because I did that to cheer on a buddy of mine who was doing the 75 hard program, which is a big mental toughness and
And he
fitness
wanted a candy
program.
bar.
On day 42, he went on Facebook and he goes, "Oh man," he goes, "I'd trade it all for a candy bar and start over tomorrow at day one." And I was out doing errands and I walked into a store to the candy aisle and I took a picture of me flipping off a Reese's peanut butter cup and I DM'd it to him. And an hour later, I get a message back. He goes, "Man, that was funny." He goes, "All right, I'm gonna make it through today." And he finished the whole 75 hard. I have since sent him more than 60 candy bar pictures of me giving him the finger. And to this day, matter of fact, he's the guy I was on a coaching call with the other day who reached out because of how much I care. So one of those pictures is on my board. Now, what that signifies is it makes me laugh, emotional, but it also shows me wanting to help people because that's what that picture was for. Like I said, the tracking system for how many miles I pedaled in the Peloton. I've got a picture of the number #198 on the ceiling right above the weight bench in my basement where I work out. There's a picture of me, a selfie pointing up at that. That's on the board, me celebrating that number. I've got a tracking system for the number of podcasts that I'm on this year. The goal was 60. I'll finish probably somewhere in the mid 40s. Because I
I'm
did take
one
a
of them.
few
I'm
months
happy for
off.
that.
You're
Do
you're
20.
on there.
We'll
I'm going
do
to color
20
your
more
dog
episodes
tomorrow.
before the end of the year. We'll hit your goal. How about that?
So all of these things are on there to represent every single part of my life. My wife Tina wanted to do some traveling, and I found a couple of pictures. One, a signpost with all the countries in Europe, and I made this in July of 2023. I've been doing mine on the mid-year. This past June, we did a European Mediterranean cruise, and we went to all but I think 2 countries, and we're going to England in December. That picture went on that vision board before any of these were reality, and she chose the trips. So you just talk about the alignment of all these things when you become aware of opportunities and you know what your goals look like, feel like, sound like, smell like, taste like, put your senses into them all and tell a full-on story is when you're going to be aware of the opportunities. And all of a sudden, these things are going to just start to, you're going to think like, wow, what a coincidence. Not at all. You put it into motion and you're tuning in and you're aware. That's why people sit around all day and they stare at their shoes or their phone all day and they ask the worst question in the world, which is, oh my gosh, what else can possibly go wrong in my life?
Right.
And the universe giggles and goes,
You're about
really?
to find out.
Okay, let's just give me another shovelful on this person over here. We just got to be careful, even when life's not perfect. I know my life's not perfect, but what I create on my board is a better version of who I am and where I want to go and what I want to create and what I want to have.
That's it right there, folks. I mean, it doesn't get any more to the point, and it's one of the things that I believe in probably more than anything in this world is visualization and then actualization. And I can't thank you enough, Steve, for taking the time to be here on Sunday morning with me. I've got an invitation to you right now to do another episode somewhere down the road, because now that we've met, I think there's a lot that we have in common. I think this could be one of the greatest episodes of all time. There was a tremendous amount of value that you provided today to the Keepin It Rio audience, and I appreciate that. But before we go, there's one thing I need to do, and you as a radio man will certainly appreciate that. I have to give a shout out to my sponsor, roofer.com. I very seldom forget Roofer, but I almost did today. I was looking up the thing. Without Roofer, I would not have anywhere near what I've got going on. They provide my roofing company with the CRM software that takes me from the very beginning all the way to the end. And I absolutely love them. They're going into the 3rd year of sponsorship. I'm putting that one out into the world now. We're going to sign another deal in January for them to sponsor me another year. And hopefully for the rest of my entire career and my podcasting, which my goal is 2,500 episodes. So I'm getting closer to 200, and we still got a couple days to hit that goal, but it's going to happen. So thank you for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it. Anyone that wants to get a hold of Steve or follow him, I highly encourage that. And like I always do when I end this podcast, I've got the corniest tagline in all of podcasting, and nobody will ever beat it. It is, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, keep on keeping it real.